Just day coming up for the Southern Tier Wednesday, sunny, pleasant, highs 75 to 80. I'm meteorologist Rob Carolyn.
Next on AM 1480 WLEA, the Newsmaker Show. Here's Ryan O'Neill.
Very glad to have live with us this morning Republican Assemblyman Phil Palmesano. Assemblyman, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Brian. It's good to be with you again.
Well, everybody's weighing in, Assemblyman, on the second Buffalo Billion trial verdict, where the suspects, the accused, the defendants, were all found guilty on the bribery and corruption charges. Did you want to say anything on that one, Assemblyman?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. This is another example of a stain on our state government. That shows that there's definitely a need of true reform and more accountability and transparency in our economic development programs. And this is another group of people with close ties to the governor being convicted. And I think it sheds the spotlight on the failures of some of these programs and the bid rigging process that's taken place. Even the U.S. Attorney General alleged that over $800 million in state contracts has been rigged to benefit campaign contributors of the Cuomo administration. I think this is something that's definitely a concern to many people across our state, the ethics regarding our economic development programs and the ethics of our public officials and people working in government, and this is something that needs to be addressed. That's why I was really pleased to see with the Albany Accountability Act that Mark Molinaro, our candidate for governor, put forward, that has 5 goals in place about, creating government of the people, by the people, for the people, opening the doors to transparency and accountability, taking big dollars out of the political process, holding politicians accountable, providing more independent oversight, and rethinking our economic development programs. This pay-to-play culture in Albany is running rampant, and it's a stain on our politics. There's no place for it, even in the 2016 July disclosure report. I believe it was Political reported of the $5 million that Governor Cuomo raised, $4.5 million was donated by entities with business before the state. We have to end that pay-to-play culture here in New York, and there are policies that we can put in place that would help to address that. And I think Mark Molinaro's proposal would address that. The database of deals, which would have an online transparent deals that are made by economic development that the public could see. Procurement Integrity Act, which would give the comptroller oversight over an analysis of these deals. These are things that have already passed the state senate that haven't been brought up by the leadership in our house, and the governor's not pushing for. We need more independent accountability and transparency if we're going to restore trust back to the people in our government, to show them that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. And I think that these failures and these convictions continue to show that there's problems within our state government that need to be addressed. And I think another proposal of the governor that Mark Molinaro had, I think that would be helpful, is the term limit proposal to reinvigorate state government, to bring new people into the process. To limit to the governor and comptroller and attorney general's 2 4-year terms, and would limit state legislators to 6 2-year terms. I think that's enough time if you want to try to reinvigorate our process, and I think that's something that we could be looking at too.
What do you make of that, Assemblyman Palmesano? The whole term limits issue.
I support it. I've co-sponsored legislation in the past to do that. There's arguments against it. I understand the arguments against it, but I still think that there's ways to reinvigorate by having term limits. You're going to have, I think, you'd have more accountability. You're not going to have people in there for 40 years. A lot of the legislature have been in there for 30 years.
You know what? Dr. Heineman has a saying, and I don't know where actually Heineman stands on term limits, but he does have a saying about, I don't know exactly what it is, but summed up, the longer you stay in politics, the less friends you have and the more political enemies you have, and it gets uncomfortable after a while.
Well, it is a process. When you're there for a long time, you could see how it could wear on you. For certain. I think I look at it from the perspective it would be good to get more fresh faces and more people with different perspectives in there, because I mean, at a minimum, Brian, if we don't do term limits, we should certainly we should absolutely be putting term limits on legislative leaders and committee chairs, because to reinvigorate to the leadership process. I mean, that's what we saw with Sheldon Silver, who was the speaker for over 20 plus years. He was going to try to be the longest tenured speaker in the state of New York until his conviction. So I think that type of power, it can be a challenge and lead to bad things, which we've seen. And I think at a minimum, if we can't get term limits done, in general, we should be looking at term limits for leaders, for legislative leaders, and for committee chairs to bring new faces into these leadership positions and these committee chairmanships. I think that would be a significant improvement upon what we have right now. But it's vitally important from my perspective that we work to resolve and restore the public's trust in state government. And I think right now it's at an all-time low because of these convictions you continue to see. Dean Skelos is on trial right now. His decision's about to be coming forward. Sheldon Silver was just recently reconvicted again. And then these other, like I said, the Buffalo Billion, Governor Andrew Cuomo's close friend, his brother, as he called him, Joe Percoco. You kind of wonder, what the governor knew and when he knew it. If that these types of things are bad. When you read stories that, again, this pay-to-play culture that over the $5 million that Governor Cuomo raised in the 2016 July report, $4.5 million was donated by entities with business before the state. That raises a red flag to a lot of us. There's things we can do. We need more public accountability and transparency in our economic development programs. Maybe we need to be rethinking some of these economic development programs as well. And I think when you have those types of, transparency, and when you have those types of accountability programs in place, like the database that deals the Public Integrity Act, which would allow the comptroller oversight, which the governor has tried to stop and push back on, independent auditors, a Moreland Commission that would investigate public corruption. That was something that we had in place, but the governor disbanded it. I mean, things like that would be steps in the right direction that would do some of the things that, like I said, Mark Molinaro is trying to do with his proposal. Again, I think the pillars of it, the 5 goals, creating a government of the people, by the people, for the people, opening the doors to transparency and accountability, taking the big dollars out of politics, holding politicians accountable, and providing integrity, oversight, more independent oversight, and rethinking our economic development programs. When you look at how much is spent, I think there was a report that the governor has doled out over $10 billion in economic development aid through New York State, and I think those numbers are staggering. And I think when we look at those types of programs, we have to have more accountability and transparency, and maybe we need to rethink on how we do some of these programs.
I was just thinking, do you think that the disaster that the governor has endured publicity-wise from the Buffalo Billion trials 1 and 2, do you think that he'll change the way he does these contest-type giveaways? And do you think that he'll I don't know, change the way money gets distributed to cities, towns, and villages throughout the state?
I think this governor is all about control. He likes to have control over the process. He likes to have control over the purse strings. I think that for him to make changes, Brian, I think he's going to have to recognize that he's been wrong in the way he's done certain things, and I can't imagine the governor admitting he was wrong on anything, quite frankly. The governor is pretty stuck in his ways on the way things he thinks that worked best. And I think he's kind of surrounded by this power vacuum that he has, and I think we need change, desperately need change, and that's why I've said over and over again I'm proud to support Mark Molinaro. I think he bring a breath of fresh air back to our Albany institution, and show leadership and bring about the bold types of proposals that we need to restore trust in our government, just like you see in the Albany Accountability Act, which he's presented. So that's what we need. We need a change in leadership in Albany at the top. And I think I don't see the governor, changing the way he's been doing things. I think.
So you don't think that there's going to be a change in the whole? Usually, it's a contest giveaway, which is the kind of thing we do here on radio. But usually, the governor. I wish we could give away the kind of money he gives away. But anyway. Anyway, usually that's what he does, and it's a contest between regions on who has the best economic development idea, and so on and so forth. Now, Assemblyman Phil Palmesano, our guest live this morning on the Newsmaker Show. Assemblyman, the governor says he wants to codify, in other words, Roe v. Wade, in other words, make it the law for in-state law for New York State. But you've said for a long time that every time Cuomo says codify, what he really means is he wants more abortion rules and regulations.
That's exactly right, Brian. What they're trying to do, the legislation is pending before the legislature that unfortunately passes the Assembly every year, would actually expand abortion in New York State, would allow for more late-term abortions. Because right now, what they're talking about is they just want to codify Roe v. Wade, but many people have forgotten that since Roe v. Wade in '73, there's been other Supreme Court decisions like Casey versus Planned Parenthood and another decision which basically allowed for restrictions to be placed on abortion by states to things like parental notification or other notification or for consulting on certain procedures would have more allow for limitations based on when abortion could take place. If they just codify Roe v. Wade, they would throw out all those other decisions by the wayside. They don't want to talk about that. They don't want those people who are supporting this don't want to talk about the existing law based on what we've seen in the court beyond just Roe v. Wade, because there are laws on the books that have been upheld by the Supreme Court that would say you need to allow states to have restrictions on abortions and when it can take place, and allow for things like I said, like parental notification and things like that, which our state never wants to take up into consideration. So I think that what they're talking about is Governor Cuomo and the legislative leaders that are pushing this in the state are talking about an expansion of abortion, which would allow for late-term abortion, more late-term abortions, where other states have been putting restrictions on late-term abortions. That's not what they want to do here in New York. They want to expand it and basically have an abortion-on-demand type of policy, and that's not anything that's acceptable to me and a number of my colleagues. And then we'll continue to push back. And I think life is precious. We need to protect life. But I think this governor and this administration and many people are just trying to expand access to abortion. And I don't think this is the right way to go. And that's something you're going to see. And even the governor is coming out going after state senators on a regular basis on this. And I think that's one of the issues that they're trying to talk about with the battle for the state senate in the fall. That's going to be at play. And I think again, when they talk about expanding abortion rights, I don't think we need more abortion in New York State. I think we need to look at less abortion.
Assemblyman, Cynthia Nixon does have a point when she says there is a thing called the Cynthia Nixon effect, because you see him pushing a lot of causes such as abortion, and now he wants to legalize marijuana, not just medical marijuana. You think she does have a point there, that since she's gotten into the race, he's veered more to the left or pushes more of the liberal causes that he maybe did before, or at least more often?
No question about it. I mean, he's been continuing to do that, and he's been moving to the left for quite some time, I believe. I said in the first 2 years of his term, I remember 2011, 2012, he was actually more conservative, especially on fiscal issues and a number of other issues, and then he started pushing a whole range of other issues like the gun control issues, the SAFE Act, and things of that nature. But I certainly think Cynthia Nixon has had an impact on him. I think he's nervous about her impact on this race. So you see him continuing to have policies that I don't think are melt with the mainstream thinking of people in the state, particularly upstate New York. But he's going to continue to do that, and that's unfortunate. And that's why, in my opinion, we need to change the leadership at the top. And that's why I believe, and that's why I'm wholeheartedly supporting Mark Molinaro, who's been to our area, has been to our region, who's coming forward with bold and ideas that would help change the culture of politics and culture of corruption in Albany. And we need someone like Mark Molinaro who would be a breath of fresh air. Who doesn't just talk the talk, he walks the walk. One thing I've been impressed by Mark is how he's led efforts to help individuals with disabilities. He's taken his own personal situation with his own daughter and been an advocate across our state for providing access and openness for individuals with disabilities. That's something that he's taken and really helped grow and spur. And then that's why it was really disheartening, back earlier, a few months ago, when Governor Cuomo made a comment trying to be in jest about his brother, saying he was disabled. He had special. I mean, it was ridiculous. I mean,
the governor was talking about his own brother there. Yeah, it was very similar to what happened to President Obama when he was on one of the late night comedy shows and Obama described himself as being a Special Olympics type athlete, and then he ended up apologizing backwards and forwards. Obama did. You're listening to the Newsmaker Show. We're on live with Assemblyman Phil Palmesano. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back in segment 2, we're going to talk about minimum wage and tipped workers and the rules there. Stay with us.
The Ryan Agencies, your local, independent insurance agencies. Insurance can be, well, hard to understand. At the Ryan Agency, they're your local insurance experts. Questions get answered, problems get solutions. It's like having your own personal insurance advisor. Contact the Ryan Agencies today, your local experts with answers and solutions.
Insurance protection you can rely on. The Ryan Agency.
Checking in with meteorologist Rob Carolyn to see what's going on.
Brian O'Neill.
You picked up on my Mary Tyler Moore reference there.
Yeah, and then you had her own show.
Oh, yeah, the Mary Tyler Moore show. That was a great one.
Chuckles the Clown.
You remember that episode?
I do. That's like up there with WKRP in Cincinnati in the Thanksgiving episode. With
the turkeys.
Some priceless stuff. Hey, we've got a couple of good days headed our way, Brian. We've got some showers and thunderstorms in the forecast over the next 24 to 48 hours as a cold front goes by. And then it looks like high pressure will move in Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday with abundant sunshine and some very comfortable conditions. We'll be looking at partial sun overall today with the risk of a shower or storm later today. It'll be warm and humid, 85 to 90. Sun up this morning was at 5:48. It'll set tonight at 8:44. Scattered showers and storms are in the forecast for tonight as that cold front gets closer, 65 to 70. Showers and thunderstorms tomorrow morning. They'll end in the afternoon. Highs near 80. Skies will brighten by late in the day. Turns partly cloudy, cooler and more comfortable tomorrow night, 55. And then sunny and pleasant Wednesday with highs of 75 to 80. More sunshine Thursday and Friday.
And we're back with Assemblyman Phil Palmesano live on our live line. Assemblyman, minimum wage, the issue of tipped workers. Where's that stand these days?
As you know, Brian, there's back in April, Assemblyman Senator O'Meara and myself had a press conference in Corning, and there were tipped workers there. There were small business restaurant owners there. The governor is trying to change the way things work right now, which would eliminate the tipped wage credit, which is something that is put in place to make sure that tipped workers are making minimum wage. At least minimum wage. Right now, they're guaranteed minimum wage. But what this proposal, by eliminating the tipped wage credit, this would be a fiscal burden to small businesses and restaurants, and it would be a negative impact on tipped workers because many of those, the governor wants to change the proposal. He's got the Labor Department. He had hearings around the state to change it to basically get rid of the tipped wages and go to this tipped wage credit and basically create just a flat minimum wage, let tipped workers be under the minimum wage, current minimum wage, which there's a tipped wage worker wage right now, and then they get their tips on top of that. Many of these workers, most of them, make well above minimum wage with their tips. A lot of tipped workers are worried about losing their wages and then also losing their jobs because this would be a detriment to small restaurant owners and businesses. And the governor is trying to change this process. I know Mark Molinaro is having a press conference down in New York today with my former colleague, as New York City Councilman now, Joe Borelli. This is a bad proposal. We need to stop this proposal. Hundreds and thousands, I think, of tipped workers had testified saying, please don't mess with our tipped wages. We like our tips. And I think the proposal the governor is talking about would basically end tips as we know it in our restaurants, in our small businesses, and basically hurt these employees who are many who, like I said, make well above minimum wage through their work, but this would basically put them just basically making minimum wage and making less money, and also again would be a negative impact on our small businesses. You'd see jobs stop, you'd see job loss, you'd see probably businesses close, you'd see an increase in prices in restaurants far and above what you see now. I think it's the wrong proposal. That's why we've been outspoken and adamantly against it. Again, Senator O'Meara and I, along with someone, Chris Fred, did a press conference in April to kind of highlight this issue, wrote a letter to the governor and the Department of Labor Commissioner asking them to stop this proposal. That's still being pending before the Department of Labor. We hope this proposal doesn't go forward. And the fact is, if they could try to do this without legislative approval, is kind of disheartening. It's circumventing the legislative process. They've done that before with the fast food worker wage. They did this again before with the tip worker when they increased the minimum wage for tip workers. I think it's a bad thing. It's not good for small businesses. It's not good for the employee, and that's something we're continuing to fight and push back against. But it's something that's still pending before the government and the Department of Labor.
I remember being at a local restaurant and talking about this at one point when minimum wage was very big in the news. This was about a year ago or so, and the restaurant owner and some of the waitresses, they all were on the same page that the increase was going to be a big problem, and they were very concerned about how that would negatively impact their ability to get tips.
Yeah, it's a legitimate concern, and you're right. What I've seen is restaurant owners and the tipped workers, the servers, are very opposed to this proposal by the governor and the Labor Department because of the impact it could have on their job, the impact it will have on their wages. And I think that's the concern that we have, and I don't think it's the right proposal. I think it's, again, the governor trying to, create a problem that's not, solve a problem that's not there. I think the process we have now works well. I think people like going to restaurants and tipping their workers. I think, again, you'll see tips going away by the wayside, and in these employees just making minimum wage is not going to be enough, and whereas now they're making well above minimum wage and making a good wage. And I think, again, you have a negative impact on the small businesses and seeing businesses shut their doors because they can't sustain this type of increase to their business, to their bottom line. And that's what the governor is doing. He's supposed to be business-friendly. His proposals aren't business-friendly. It just hurts small businesses, and you'll hurt the very employees that you're trying to help. That's unfortunate, and that's why we have to stop this proposal.
We've been talking with Corning Republican Assemblyman Phil Palmesano. We're out of time. Assemblyman, thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us.
Thank you, Brian.
It's AM 1480 WLEA Hornell. Stay with us for the Brian Kilmeade Show.